the mission from the start has been to build the world's greatest consumer-facing operating business. Like, I want to be the best in the world at what we do. And that is hard.
Welcome and welcome back. Hi, Florian. How are you doing?
Hello, Mario. I'm doing well. How are you?
Today, I have a very, very interesting question for you, Florian. How many restaurants do you believe one man can operate?
Oh, my God. I mean, given the fact that I know who we are talking to today, it's thousands.
How many restaurants you feel you can operate, Florian?
Me, I would say I would say I could do something around between 50 and 100.
Okay, I think then you could become...
I would say I have the courage for that.
Okay, then you could become a governor in the structure of our guests. So today, as you heard, we have a very special guest. We have here Greg Flynn, the founder, chairman, and CEO of the Flynn Group. And the Flynn Group is the world's largest franchisee. So we're very proud and happy to have him. 2,900 restaurants, plus 40 fitness clubs, plus 120 hotels in 3 countries, US, Australia, New Zealand, with 6 brands, Applebee's, Taco Bell, Panera Bread, Pizza Hut, Wendy's, and Arby's. And since 1999, a 30% annual growth rate, bringing the group now to $5 billion sales, 450 million earnings, and over 75,000 people employed. That's big numbers for our podcast here. So welcome, Greg. How are you doing?
Great. Thanks for having me, Mara. Really appreciate it.
So our friend Henry McGovern introduced us and said, this is the guy you need to talk to. And he put the benchmark quite high. But when I read up yesterday about you, I was like, oh my God. So the world's largest franchisee, almost 3,000 restaurants. Greg, looking back in a nutshell, what do you think is actually or are actually the key factors for being successful in our industry? What do you think it is in the essence which makes this success possible?
Sure. I mean, I think that the most essential feature of, a successful restaurant company is running restaurants well, right?
Sounds so simple.
Yeah, I mean, the name matters, the concept matters, the menu matters, the look of the restaurant matters. But what matters the most is how you execute day in and day out for the rest of time. And we focus, 90% of our efforts on that. And as a franchise operator, we have the license to do that because we actually are licensees of brands and we pay them to do most of the other stuff like menu and store design and things like that. I like being a franchisee for that very reason, because we can be focused on the thing which matters most.
So operational excellence, speed of service, execution. And in one interview, you said discipline. And I want to stay a little bit in this discipline because we just issued a white paper and we interviewed so far almost 30 entrepreneurs in our industry. And one entrepreneur, Tom Barton from Honest Burger, said discipline is such a kindness to yourself. So if you're disciplined at the end, you're kind. And I read in a lot of interviews, at least I had the feeling that you are very disciplined and you run a very disciplined organization. Is that correct? Is that the secret to success?
I think it's very correct in most ways. We try to run our restaurants very tightly so that there's no ragged edges that will deliver less than a great guest experience. And we don't always do it, but we always try to do it. And we have all sorts of systems, practices, cultural values, and teams in place to do that. I'd say that one place we might appear less disciplined than most restaurant companies is in our basic structure. Like, we are more decentralized than most restaurant businesses, which tend to be command and control pyramids with one guy at the top who tells everyone else what to do and they do it. That sounds like it's more disciplined, versus we are like a constellation of owner operators supported centrally, but also subject to some federal law, as it were. Think of it as state and federal law as to outcomes like store cleanliness and things like that. That sounds less disciplined, but it actually results, we think, in better execution which reflects discipline of operations, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think what the problem with this model is by the time it gets to the bottom, like everything is somebody else's decision, and you don't know where it came from. It came from, some black box, and you don't own it the same way as if you made that decision. And now it's up to you to execute it,
Mm-hmm.
and it's on you if it fails. Like that leads to greater discipline.
Mm-hmm. And we also had one other theme in this interview so far. It's resilient. And one guy was Henry McGovern, who introduced us, who always says like anything is possible. Don't take no for an answer. If you look back to your career and in so many years with so many growths, there must be like heavy headwinds and struggles and doubts. Can you you have a memory on a crisis where actually your resilience as an entrepreneur helped you to overcome that difficult situation and put you back into the driver's seat? Can you travel back with us to a early example or just recent example where really the resilience of you as a founder and leader or the leadership team mattered to turn around a difficult situation?
Sure. So I think I'd go all the way back to my first entry into the restaurant industry, where I started building World Wraps restaurants. Now, this was a raw startup. It sort of created the whole wraps category. I didn't start it. My good friend from business school did, but he and I shook hands, and I became a licensee from store number 2 onward, building in the Pacific Northwest. And I built 14 of them from scratch between 1995 and 99.
Mm-hmm.
Everything about it was hard. Right? It is hard to get landlords to lease space to you. It's hard to get vendors to sell equipment to you. Forget about credit or debt. You can't borrow anything when you're a raw startup. It's hard to get people to work for you. And then it's hard to get customers to try you out. And I came to appreciate that, the restaurant industry is perceived to have a wide spectrum of risk, and that's correct, or a high level of risk, but it's also a wide spectrum of risk. And I was playing on the riskiest end of this wide spectrum. And I became aware of large national established mature franchise businesses in the late 90s, and mostly because a form of debt became available for them and for them alone. And it was reflective of their lower level of risk. And that's when I had to come to Jesus. It's like, why am I doing this the hard way? Like there's a much better and easier way to do it down here. And so I pivoted in 99. I borrowed all of the money and I bought 8 Applebee's restaurants, and that went very well. And, I pivoted permanently. That's what we did for the rest of the time. Handed off the World Wraps restaurants to our CFO. So that sounds like it was sort of a life or death moment. Not kind of. I mean, like we barely made payroll every 2 weeks. I mean, we really had to scrap it together with World Wraps. That wasn't the case with these larger franchise restaurants. And that's one of the things I loved about them. Like they had such steady cash flow. You could borrow all of the money to get into them. They attracted great people to work. You could get landlords to lease you space, and ultimately customers tried you out, without a lot of coaxing because they already knew your brand. And so everything was going fine until probably the next crisis was COVID. We were mostly a full service restaurant company going to COVID. And that week of March 13th, when all of our restaurants shut, it was, one of those moments. It's like, wow, are we going to survive this? And the thing about the restaurant industry, it's high volume and low margin, and it relies entirely on daily receipts to pay the bills. And if those receipts stop coming in, but the bills keep coming in, like you are out of money really fast. So that took all hands on deck effort to, keep it together. We made, there were 2 crucial decisions everyone needed to make during COVID. Do we close the restaurant or stay open as best we can with off-premise and other things? Or, and do we lay off our staff, or do we furlough them, and keep them on our benefits program, keep them in our
family
HR systems? Yeah. And we made the right decision on both of those, which was stay open as best you can and keep everyone on the payroll, maintain all their benefits. That put us in a position to come back faster than almost anyone else as the world reopened. And that turned into a great competitive advantage. So, it sort of was a life or death moment, but we made it through and came out stronger on the other end at the end of the day.
I think that the 2 examples you picked are great reflections on that every crisis at the end has a turning point where it drives into an opportunity, and the crisis of not being able to fund your rep business basically opened this opportunity to build this great company based on franchising, because you discovered that, and your crisis in COVID at the end created the opportunity after COVID to be in a better position. So we always see this flip side of the coin between the crisis and the opportunities. So thanks for sharing that. Florian, you wanted to
I think the hallmark of a successful entrepreneur is always being open to changing circumstances that may throw up opportunities you didn't expect. And that doesn't mean don't pursue a plan or even a dream with determination. I mean, you can do that, but being nimble and agile is really crucial. Like, yeah, I think one of the things we've been good at over the years is adapting to ever-changing circumstances, and seizing opportunities that weren't in our plan, but that we came to find along the way.
Yeah. Greg, casual dining has been written off several times, and although you have a significant footprint in QSR, you're still betting on casual dining concepts. How do you see the future of casual dining, and what needs to be changed to stay relevant?
Absolutely, that's a great question, and I get it all the time. I think that there is and will pretty much always be a large market for sit-down dining with liquor. And that's what casual dining is. If you think that there will not be a large market for that indefinitely, then you shouldn't enter the segment. But as long as there is, someone's going to sell into it, and it becomes a question of who can do it most profitably, and you'll end up, taking share. And our full service dining, our casual dining, is Applebee's. Applebee's is, one of the largest casual dining chains in the world. It enjoys all the advantages of scale. It has wonderful brand awareness, wonderful brand love. It has a unique position. It is really, neighborhood comfort food. It's sort of a position no one else can sort of claim in it. It also has a great team, and it has great advertising. And it has a really robust supply chain. So, our costs tend to be lower than all of our competitors. And we, you put all that together, and we're competitive in a highly competitive segment, a segment that you can even say is shrinking, but that doesn't mean someone can't make money doing it. And we are making money doing it. In fact, we had an excellent year last year. The best year we ever had in Applebee's was 21, right? Because 20 was really tough. It was existential, but the bounce back in 21 was epic, and everyone wanted to go out and sit down and have dinner with alcohol.
Yeah. The interesting fact of your career and how you built your company is basically, if you just narrow it down, you acquired more restaurants than you built. So your biggest bite was actually in that specific year, 2021, when you bought and integrated almost 1,000 restaurants with Pizza Hut and Wendy's. Did you ever doubt that this goes wrong? So did you ever had in mind that you say, how can I do that possibly?
So, listen, I mean, you're making calculated, educated bets all along the way. Like, everything we do is basically an educated guess and a bet, right?
At large scale.
That was a big one. It was, I'm not sure it was a bet the house kind of bet, because, you can isolate risk. And in that case, we did isolate risk. Like, if those businesses went really poorly, we would have lost some money, but it wouldn't have brought down the whole ship. It's one of the advantages of being a diversified company at scale. But those, the NPC opportunity, those two brands were really right in our wheelhouse. I mean, we set off on a journey starting in 2012 to diversify. And we made a conscious decision to diversify to reflect the composition of the restaurant industry, which is mostly QSR restaurants. So we knew we needed to go that direction. So when the NPC opportunity came up, it's not like we had to change our thinking around it. It was just, a faster, adaptation of a business plan that was already in place. And then there's the idea that it was uniquely attractive to us because I don't think anyone else could have executed on it. It took pretty much money, but more than that, it took a lot of operational talent and depth of bench and, track record experience, buying and integrating at a large scale, which we had done before. And I don't think there was anyone else who could have done it. No one else stepped up to try to do it. So it really felt like it was a deal tailor-made for us. There was risk, but I deemed it an acceptable risk. It turned out to be the best thing we ever did, really.
Yeah, it's amazing.
And you talked now so much about these brands which you partner with and admire, all these great brands in your portfolio, and also probably quite an obvious question, but did you never had the appetite to own one of these brands or other brands by themselves? Because as such a big franchisee as you are, quite aware that you have a strong seat at the table and then a strong say, nevertheless, it's not your baby, not your brand. How did you resist to buy such a brand or to set up one by yourself? You never had the ego to be on the other side of the table, Greg?
Well, it's funny you say ego. So I've seen a lot of franchisees over the year, grow and be very successful within an existing system. And many of them think that their success is the result of their efforts alone. And that is generally not the case when you're a franchise operator. I mean, there are many very talented people in our, franchise industry, and, much of the credit goes to them, but much of the credit goes to the system you're in, right? And the leadership of those brands, the position of the brands in the industry, and the other franchisees pulling in the same direction. Nevertheless, I've seen multiple times people think, you know what, I'm so good at this, that means I'm good at everything. And so I can buy a brand and I'm going to do just as well with those brands as, I did as a franchisee. The classic example, it's a bit dated at this point, it was the largest Applebee's franchisee who exited Applebee's just before we entered it in the late 90s. It was a company called Apple South. And, they got up to 250 or so Applebee's. They went public and they started buying brands. And they finally bought a brand called Hops, which, Applebee's deemed was competitive with them. And they were probably right about that. And they got in a big fight, and Apple South tried to take over Applebee's, but didn't fail. And finally, they divested their Applebee's. And, in a moment of hubris, the, founder and leader of Apple South said, what do I need you guys for? This is easy. I can do it better than you. I'll just bury you, as a competitor. And lo and behold, 10 years later, they were bankrupt. I mean, went from a highly successful company with hundreds of millions of dollars to zero, right? It's very instructive. Like, you need to be aware of the kind of hubris that often comes with success as a franchise operator. I like to think that we're in business for ourselves, but we're not in business by ourselves. And that second part really matters. Like, the rest of the system is doing a lot for you. Don't think it's all you.
But Greg, how close have you been? I understand that you seem to be very rational and very disciplined, but how close have you been over that career to make that step / mistake? You never had
I don't think it's necessarily a mistake. I think go into it with your eyes open about your own limitations and the higher level of risk and the different skill set it takes to do that. Listen, never say never. We have looked at a lot of opportunities to, become a concept owner, and we may well do that sometime. But, we haven't yet run out of opportunities, including the very large ones, to grow as franchise operators. And that's a safer bet for us. As long as those opportunities last, at the quantity we need them to last, we're just rational to sort of stick to our knitting. Having said that, we are diversifying already. We've gone into Planet Fitness. We went international last year. We are open to doing different things. We just want to be sensible about it.
Yeah, I would like to jump on that going international, what you actually mentioned. You said international is an unlimited opportunity, but at the same time, or in another context, but you said also we wanted to take baby steps which cannot harm us. Now, again, I understood now that it's just the scale and the isolated risk you take, but going down under Australia, New Zealand, taking over 300 stores, how was that? Is that the end? Is that the beginning? Is Europe the next uncharted territory for you?
So I say with a high level of confidence, it's not the end. It probably is just the beginning. That our plan is to keep going internationally. I think it is a big world out there, and there are other franchise operators in the restaurant industry and in other industries that do very well in countries that aren't the US. And I don't see any reason why we can't also. However, we know what we don't know, and we don't know what we don't know. And so we want to, take a baby step first time around. And so Australia felt like a really good first step for us. I mean, pretty far away from San Francisco, but there are good nonstop flights to all three major cities in Australia. It's the same language. It's the rule of law. They have a demonstrated affection for American brands. The business we bought was an existing successful business with a high functioning team. The opportunity was to, buy it well because it's a very illiquid market down there, and then to grow it. We don't worry so much about, exit on any one given opportunity because we don't really sell, right? So it makes us a good, sometimes the only buyer for many of these opportunities. And that has proved to be correct. I mean, that business we bought over a year ago is now performing right to plan. We've supplemented it with Wendy's in New Zealand and Australia. Probably wouldn't have done Wendy's, but for the team on the ground we already had for the 270 Pizza Hut restaurants. But with that team, who was capable of doing more and eager to do more, we felt like that was a great add-on opportunity. And so we'll do more elsewhere, but I really like this first step. It also wasn't a bet the farm kind of, amount of money for us, to be honest.
Okay. This podcast is about doubts and drive. And if I listen to you, I have the feeling there has never been a huge portion of doubt in your life. You're very positive, you're straightforward, and you think everything will work out very well because I planned it right. We had a guest in one of our first shows who said, does it kill me or is it just harming me? Did you ever had such situations where you thought, how can I survive that situation? Or do you have this huge confidence in yourself and your organization that everything will work out well?
I like to think that I have confidence for good reason because, I have a lot of advantages. I mean, I was lucky enough to be born in a great country at a great time. And, I'm got a great education. And so I do have all the advantages of that. I also think we've been pretty sensible about it. We've been diversified from the start. I came out of Stanford Business School in '94. My first business was real estate. And, I started buying office buildings. Now it's mostly hotel business. And we have, as Mario mentioned, 120 hotels. But it was 6 months later, I went into the restaurant business. And so I've always had at least two businesses. And that gives you some comfort right there, that diversification. If one fails, you still got the other. And now we are highly diversified in both businesses, right? With a national portfolio of hotels that are, isolated from each other in terms of risk and debt and stuff like that. And then on the restaurant side, and health clubs, 7 different brands, in different segments and different geographies. It's very diversified. It's hard to imagine almost anything that could bring the whole group down. I did a master's in history at Yale before going to Stanford. And I did my master's thesis on a shipbuilder named John Roach. In the 1870s and 80s, he became the largest shipbuilder in the United States. He built the steel steam navy under a government contract. He was a totally self-made immigrant from Ireland, by the way, really impressive. But he put pretty much all of his eggs in one basket in this naval contract. And then for political reasons, the Navy didn't pay him and he went bankrupt. And that was really instructive. I've always thought, what I need to avoid is getting myself into that kind of situation. I've never been in that kind of situation.
And did you ever thought about going into other concepts like more Asian, Italian style steaks, fine dining, or was QSR and fast casual always the target for you?
We're wide open to ethnic cuisines and to fine dining, steak in particular. I mean, I don't love steakhouses myself. I don't, as a customer, it's not my favorite business model, but owning steakhouses can be very attractive. I mean, it's such a massive sort of upsell opportunity and sort of the selling to business groups, mostly in social groups with a lot of pressure and add-ons. It makes a very profitable business. I think it's unpleasant personally, but a lot of people like it, And so I'm wide open. And then there are great ethnic cuisines. I mean, we looked hard at P.F. Chang's, right? And P.F. Chang's is a wonderful concept in its own right. Benihana really has a unique place in America, and no one really comes close to it.
Right.
Panda Express is a great business.
So we will follow you. We will follow this up if there is an Asian
appetite, a huge appetite. And Greg, before I come to this next topic, which will be the future of hospitality, I need to double down on this question from Florian because our audience is 60% European. So when we gonna see you in Europe, Greg, or do we need to?
Well, I'm flying to Istanbul tonight.
But on privately, or you planning to buy something in Istanbul?
Turkish Airways, baby. No, I'm just going. I'm just going for vacation. But
yeah, we maybe there's rumors now that you're buying something in Turkey. So we just launched, besides or as an extension of the podcast, which is called From Down to Drive, a new platform in Europe, which is called Numoro, and it will be around shaping the future of hospitality. And therefore, we do a lot of thinking and meetings on terms of, okay, what is actually driving the future of hospitality? So as you have a very wide view on 3 countries, a lot of concepts, a lot of data, probably more data than everybody else in terms of consumer behavior. What do you see 5, 10 years down the road in our industry? What is the future of hospitality from your point of view?
I think there'll be a lot of automation of production processes, of service and delivery, ordering. I think that's going to go on in all consumer sectors, but in the restaurant industry, we see it happening right now. And when I've said this before, and no disrespect to all the incredible hardworking people we have working in our restaurants, but it wouldn't surprise me at all if someone could make a pizza with no human being in 5 or 10 years.
Right.
You sort of see it coming. And then I live in California, and they just adopted a $20 minimum wage, which for you Europeans may not sound so high, but compared to the rest of the country, it's pretty high. And I see it playing out, that it's causing restaurateurs in California to just lean harder into automation and to figure out ways to be more efficient with labor, to offer few hours to their workers, and to just eliminate roles entirely if you can. And it's very sad to me because the restaurant industry is probably the greatest provider of entry-level jobs in the nation, maybe the world. And 1 out of 4 Americans have worked in a restaurant. 1 out of 5 Americans had their first job in a restaurant. Many of those are people from disadvantaged communities that are putting their foot on the first rung of the employment ladder. Right? And then all the studies show that if you're from a disadvantaged community and you don't get that first job, like your trajectory is completely different.
Right.
And they can define any job as it needs to pay a living wage and raise the minimum wage to $100 an hour, and you'll just have fewer entry-level jobs, right? And that part is very sad. I actually think the Europeans, are much smarter on this subject, where many countries have a bifurcated wage. There's like a training wage or a starting wage or a youth wage, which recognizes that there are people who need to get into the workforce who probably aren't worth, they're not experienced enough. They don't contribute the cost of a living wage that supports a family, but they also don't have a family to support yet. It's just very sensible. And the US doesn't have that concept.
We had Mats Lederhausen on our podcast, and he was very reflected about this specific point, where he said, our industry is probably one of the few where you can start, that's why it's also the saying, as a dishwasher, and end up as a millionaire, because it allows this career literally from the entry level up the ranks to the restaurant manager, to the operation manager, to the CEO. And I'm sure running such a big organization, you have hundreds of examples where somebody starts with an entry level job in your company and ends up having a seat at the table in the board. And that's not normal in other industry. I mean, it's not you don't start as a nurse and end up as a doctor. Yeah, you have much more barrier in other industry, but ours allows that. And I was also thinking when you said about this automatization, that when we call our industry hospitality industry, and it comes from hosting and taking care, how in 5 to 10 years with such a high degrees of automatization, and you said run a pizza restaurant without human being, where will be the human touch, the hospitality element then of these concept or of these direction? How do you see that playing out?
Also, we talked earlier about the viability of casual dining. I
Mhm.
think there is a craving for an experience that involves human interaction, and I think it's mostly with sit-down dining.
Mm.
And especially, a dinner experience where it's a social occasion and, people like to be served and they like to interact with their servers and their managers. And so I think that's the obvious place to me. Well, there will be ongoing, needs for humans. But I think that's potentially true at sort of every level of dining too. I remember, who was it? Elon Musk's brother.
Mhm.
I forget his, but he like
Tim Bertrand.
had some fast casual concept
Mhm. Yes.
and he sort of loudly called the death of casual dining. And like no one wants to talk to a person anymore. And his idea was like you're going to order from an app and you're going to get it from a cubby or whatever. I don't know. But I think he's wrong. I think he's probably out of business actually. But there
Totally.
is a lot of we are social animals and we like interacting with each other. And
Mm.
as long as a job can be done as well by a human at a similar cost, like I think there's a preference for a human doing it. It's just when those costs get so out of balance that it's going to throw up some change, I think.
Yeah.
Mm. The next topic we already touched at the beginning. I read up that you run your company like states, and you have governors, and the governors has a certain amount of restaurants to take care, and then you have these federal resources. You touched that also at the beginning, that this is kind of your unique way. Can you tell us a little bit about that structure and that self-autonomy and that trust actually you give in that decentralized structures? How do you run that? What's important to run that? What's the key success factor on that structure?
Well, sure. I mean, it goes back to your first question, what matters the most for success? And it's running your restaurants well each and every day, everywhere, all the time, for the rest of the time. And who does that the best? Our observation is that local owner operators do it. Why? Because first and foremost, they have the best information available to them. They know their people in the restaurants. It's probably the most important thing by far, like their own staffs. But
Mhm.
they know their guests, they know their competitors, they know their vendors, they know their real estate. They just have better information with which to make, the many small and large decisions that restaurateurs need to make along way. Um, we try to push authority as far down the line toward the restaurants as we can. Where we think is the optimal place to put like the highest level of authority is in that sort of we call market presidents, but that local owner operator that is running a group of stores within a defined geography and within one brand, right? And so that's like 20 to 40 restaurants, close enough so they can get to all of their restaurants with enough frequency to know the people and to know what's really going on. Yet it's a big enough group that justifies the expense of a world-class operator. And, world-class operators, they need enough span. Like, you're not going to get one to run one restaurant.
Mm.
Um, but they also want support because there's all this stuff that needs to happen above restaurants. And so we have these local owner operators are running markets and their market presidents supported by, a 400 person team that is really best in class. It's supporting, at doing everything that needs to get done with HR, IT, accounting, finance, admin, training, purchasing. I mean, everything that has to get done. We do it better and at a lower cost for them. And how do we keep from these guys sort of going rogue or making a series of bad decisions that really hurts us out of inexperience or whatever? We meet frequently. I mean, the human relationships in our structure are really crucial. We invest a lot
Mm.
in that. And we also align our financial incentives. So, profit sharing is a big component of a market president's compensation, but the biggest by far is ownership in the top company, Flynn Group. And we share that very generously. And, so many of those things are unusual for our industry, where generally speaking, the economics are monopolized by, one guy or a very small group of guys at the very top. And, the rest are paid salaries or hourly wages just to do what they're told. And it's way less exciting being in that structure than in ours, where, you can become a millionaire. By the way, when you said, cooks becoming millionaires, we personally have created, it's probably, I don't know if it's hundreds at this point, but scores like ourselves of that exact outcome, right? And those are those market presidents,
Mm-hmm. So these are the ones you call governors. Was that the term you used in one of the interviews that you say?
Yeah, because if you're thinking of it as a state and federal model, they'd be the equivalent to like a state governor.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
So these decentralized structures with the power, you would say these governors or whatever you call them, they are sorry, how you call them?
Market president.
Market president. So these market presidents, they have the full executional power and authorities to make the decision on the ground.
So yes, but with guardrails, sort of freedom within a framework, right? First of all, we're members of franchise systems, and that puts some guardrails on you right there. Like there are standard operating procedures, which you have to respect. There are federal, there's elements of federal law that we ourselves adopt and require, and that's outcomes as to, for instance, food safety, or the physical condition of restaurants. Like, I'm not going to tell you how you're going to get gum off your sidewalk, right? Because if it's February in Minnesota, you're going to do it differently than if it's, July in Florida. But you need to do it. Like we mandate outcomes, but we don't tell them how to do it, right? Yeah. And a market president has broad authority over operating procedures, staffing, CapEx, but within limits. So a market president can't build a restaurant without getting, the buy-in from the senior leadership of the company. But there's real power in that position. So for instance, the way most companies work with development is they have a development team, whatever, and they find a location, they build a restaurant, they hand it off to the operators. And if it goes well, everyone, high fives each other. But when it doesn't, everyone's doing that. It's like, those idiots picked a bad location and those idiots can't run restaurants. Right. In our structure, no restaurant can get built without the buy-in and formal approval of the market president, because we're going to look to that market president for its results. Like, you need to own it. Now, because of profit sharing, they want to build restaurants. It grows their portfolio and they can just make more money, but they need to do it very thoughtfully and not, and so, our real estate team, they find sites and they come to our presidents. Our presidents turn them down all the time.
Mm-hmm. I hear integration is a huge part of your corporate culture then. So culture as itself is actually an asset for a successful company. Could you walk us through your culture of your Flynn Group? What is important for you personally? What is above everything within the Flynn Group, where you say this is a cornerstone and we will not go away from that?
Well, I would say it's, if I had to boil it down, it's empowerment and trust, and a drive to win. Empowerment and trust are the structural and cultural elements. So really just like the glue of our whole business. And drive to win is what we share. I mean, we're very competitive. All of our people are competitive, but in a really friendly, collaborative way. And the way we're set up is, our market presidents all are running all of the restaurants in any given geography in one brand, right? So they're not competing with each other, and they all have ownership at the top level. They have every incentive, and plus it's just cultural for us, to help each other, right? So we have enough scale in all of our brands to have perfect comparison results between markets. And we invest heavily in meetings where we identify, challenges and opportunities and best practices, and those disseminate throughout our business. And, like you said earlier, we have great information systems. Like, I can tell you, how anybody's doing at any given minute practically in our whole system. But we can stack rank and help people benchmark against their peers. And that becomes a learning tool unto itself, because not only can they see, okay, I'm sort of lagging on this or that metric, but they can reach out to someone who will be cooperative to help them figure out how to get better on that metric.
Mm.
It's a powerful self-affirming formula.
Right.
Before I let Florian go to our signature question at the end, I want to make one remark on this. A play to win. We had Victor here who runs the Big Mama Group, and he said nothing builds culture as strong as winning and succeeding together, because this winning and improving and getting better is really, really a strong element on building a structure. But what I wanted to ask you, two more questions before Florian wraps up. One was, everything I found on the internet in my research was positive. I tried to find a crisis, a negative article, etc. So after I kind of failed my Google search, I took ChatGTP and I put in all your data and said, ChatGTP, give me some dirt on Greg Flynn and the Flynn Group. Give me any scandal, anything, and literally didn't find anything. So tell me what I have missed, Greg, because instead of asking ChatGTP, I ask you, what scandal, negative thing, what did I miss? What did ChatGTP miss in my research?
Listen, I'll be candid about it. There was a little thing, last year, where I was in the news for a relationship I have with the governor of California, and it was in connection to, a minimum wage increase, and, this exemption appeared in the law that people from the outside said, hey, that exempts Greg Flynn's Panera business. And I didn't ask for it. And our governor didn't explicitly instruct anyone to do it. Frankly, it is a little weird that this exemption existed, but there it was. And, we only have like 24 Paneras in California. It's not like,
move the needle, no?
It wouldn't done me much good. And plus, if everyone else has to pay $20, we're going to have to pay it too. Like, it was sort of silly, but it was scandalous. People were like, oh, this is cronyism at its worst. And I was like, okay, listen, if I were going to do it, I would have gone much larger than that.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, if you say like we take baby steps international, buying 300 restaurants, we wouldn't try to optimize the relationship with the governor to improve the result of 24 restaurants. My last question is about your why, Greg, because once you reach a certain number of restaurants and number of sales and number of income, etc., at one stage when money just becomes a number, and we had a guest here, he said, if you don't cry talking about the why, it's probably not your why. So what is still driving you? Because like, if you now have 2,900 restaurants or 4,900 or 5 billion or 8 billion sales, it's hard to believe that this is driving you, this number. What is it? What makes you waking up full of energy and going into the next chapter, the chapter 4 of your career? What is it? What's the why?
All the specific numbers are meaningless. There's no magic to any of them. The mission from the start has been to build the world's greatest consumer-facing operating business. Like, I want to be the best in the world at what we do, and that is hard. And I think if we can do that, we have an advantage that is defensible, because running consumer-facing operating businesses really well, consistently over time and over multiple geographies and different brands and even different industries, like, that's a skill set which is rare. And I just want to build, a business that lasts, that we're all proud of, that provides lots of opportunity. I've loved almost every step of it. I have a great team. I'm very sad my COO and partner, Brad Pender, just retired this year after 30 years together. And, that's just the latest. But the guy who runs our Applebee's business, we've been together now for 27 years. Our CFO, we've been together for since 2001, 23 years. Like, we have a great team. We're super close. And we all just take a lot of pride in what we're doing. And the pride isn't in any given number of restaurants or whatever. It's in moving ever closer to our goal of being the world's best operating business.
That's actually a very good final word of you, Greg. But nonetheless, I need to ask you one question, and we ask that everybody on that podcast. If a young entrepreneur comes and asks you for advice, and you have lots of advice collected through your career. What is the toolbox you would give him? What is your answer? What is your advice for a person who is in doubt and needs to come back to drive?
I think it would probably be very mindful of the risk adjustment for opportunities. Right? A lot of opportunities out there. Like everyone's talking about AI right now. So you could say, you know what, I want to be an entrepreneur. I'm going to jump into the AI world. And that's very exciting. But, there are a million other people doing that. And a lot of them have probably more money than you and experience than you. And there are many good opportunities that are a lot less glamorous that may be much, much better risk-adjusted bets. That's ultimately what I concluded when I pivoted from like the startup restaurant business to becoming a participant in the mature restaurant business. It was a better risk-adjusted bet.
Yeah.
And one that, it had a lot of attractions and advantages, like you can get to scale and debt and stuff like that. But most people underestimate the pedestrian opportunities and chase too hard the sexy ones. So I would say, there are many pedestrian ones that are just better risk-adjusted bets.
That's a very good advice, as we have probably a couple of minutes left for one more question. If you now look at the current, your own ecosystem, the world's ecosystem around you, what are the problems or the issues out there which keep you up at night? Is there anything on the world stage of politics, economics, climate change, your election, bigot, which really make you concerned, which keep you up at night? Is there anything which feels like...
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure anything keeps me up at night, except too much coffee right before bed. But, there are things I worry about on a global level. I mean, we just went through a pandemic that was, bad, but like I can envision one that is much worse, right? More virulent, right? This one, I hate to say, it was like pretty mild compared to what I can imagine. That worries me. I really worry about, conflicts in the Middle East or elsewhere escalating into global conflict. And that scares me, to be honest. I have my wife's sister is a very famous author, Anne Applebaum, and she's written extensively on the rise of autocracy, around the world. But she just wrote a book called Autocracy Inc., which looks at it, now as is playing out in many countries, including the United States. She also has a podcast called Autocracy in America. She's a wonderful author, by the way, Pulitzer Prize winning. I worry about the world's oldest democracy in the United States succumbing to autocratic tendencies. And ultimately, there is nothing that we should take for granted about our democracy. And it's a really scary and pivotal moment for us right now.
So Florian, now we got the toolkit on how to build and run over almost 3,000 restaurants. Incredible. And what he said offline, guys, we were already offline. And then I said to Greg, just connect us to one of your assistants because we want to get some pictures and links. And then he said, I don't have an assistant. It's actually company culture not to have an assistant. So maybe that's one of the key success criteria, Florian. Like hands-on, all hands on deck. Okay, anyway.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, as he said, one of the first ingredients for his success, running your restaurants well.
Yeah, sounds so simple, guys.
Simple as that.
Whoever had a restaurant or a few, but he that was so clear, the focus, and also this, you said that before, the spread, the task that they separated. Like he says, I don't mind paying the franchise fee and being part of the system, and somebody else takes care of product development and marketing, and buy into mature grown-up brands, and I can focus on running restaurants well. This discipline, what he has in terms of consistency, speed of service, operational excellence, that seems to be the key of his success.
execute day in, day out, he said. No? And then being open to changing circumstances at the same time. So he said you need to be very nimble and agile.
100%. And as a guy who bought more restaurants than he built, obviously financial engineering was a driver from the early beginning, because when he opened up, first he said the main driver to go into the franchising was basically that he figured out if he starts building own brands from scratch, nobody will give him money, and he won't have the purchasing power, etc. So he came with a very pragmatic, financial-driven analysis into franchising. And he stays very analytic and financial engineers. He said, isolate a risk. And although the bets which you brought up to say I buy 1,000 restaurants sounds a lot crazy number, and he said definitely would harm us, but it wouldn't kill us, which reminded me on Michael Duroch when he had us. He said actually it wouldn't have brought the boat down. Yes, we would have lost a lot of money, but it wouldn't have brought the boat down. So isolate risks.
Absolutely.
Don't put all the eggs in one basket.
Then he said, highly diversified as he is in his business, but at the same time, and this is probably something that will also stick in my mind, we don't know what we don't know. So, you also can go towards something, and he has this high, as I said, he has this high positive attitude in doing business. He is very confident in what he's doing because it's backed up by experience, by numbers, by his team, of course, and very, very interesting how he actually did manage all these acquisitions.
Yeah, and I think as we said before, this isolating risk and diversification, and he was very proud also to bring that up. He said from the beginning of my career, I always had two legs to stand on, and we had Enrico Santano who also said like you need two legs to stand on. And now, I mean, he has many, many legs. He has like 6 restaurant brands, a fitness operator, 120 hotels. But even within the hotels, he pointed out different geographic, different brands, etc. So very driven by making sure, and that's to your sentence, we don't know what we don't know. If they make a wrong decision, it will not bring the boat down. And I think we had that theme all over the podcast.
Yeah. We talked a little bit about his structure. I mean, it is a huge organization, 75,000 employees, local owner operators. And we quite often hear this amongst our industry, how important it actually is to know your market. He calls them then market presidents, because those guys, they know their people, they know their staff, they know their guests, their vendors. They are better informed than anybody else. And I actually really like that they approve a lot of things that are going on in the field, in their area, giving them trust and trying to push authority as far away from them as possible. That is that's also a key of success for his business, I guess.
And very, in the positive sense, capitalistic, let them participate fully on the upside potential. Because, I mean, he said, I'm not sure if we have created already 100 millionaires, but a substantial amount. And we talked about these career opportunities in our industry, from the dishwasher to the millionaire. And as he is open to share with even shareholding in your company and bonuses, etc., he gives a huge motivation and buy-in to these local owner operators or market presidents, he calls them. And that's why he can also delegate that decision, because they are incentivized in the right sense. And you touched, Flynn, the culture and how important that is. And we are here play to win, like very strong American, probably. Totally play to win.
I remember, Mario, you know that when this little keynote I made within Vapiano all the time, where I said hunt together, lose together, win together. Yes. So that reminded me completely when he said we empower, and we empowerment to trust and the will to success and to win. It's a driver, like with Luke, with Victor as well, as you mentioned.
100%. And he said, I want to be the best in the world. When we asked him, he already said that will be the title of the podcast. when we ask him what actually is driving you, I mean, it doesn't matter if you now have 5 billion or 7 billion or 8 billion or whatever, it's just a number. And he said, yes, you're right. But we want to be the best in the world in the consumer-facing retail/restaurant brands. And I mean, he already proven a huge growth. I mean, 30% annual growth since 1999. I think, and he was not clear. I think he was hiding something. I think we're going to see him soon in Europe with a small acquisition.
Asian concept.
A couple of thousand restaurants.
Okay, no more rumors. No.
No more rumors. So what else, Glenn? We have one more learning.
One more. I mean, at the end, he said if somebody comes up to him asking for advice, he said, be mindful, evaluate the risk adjustments you can do. I think it's something we never heard in that way, I guess, over the past shows, where somebody says, be more mindful about your decision. Not always follow the shiny objects. There are other paths which are profitable or good for you as a person as well. So it's
and I think, I mean, not to charge any of these brands, but I think even in our industry, we always look for this next hipster and cool brand. And have you heard about that? And that blah, blah, blah. Yeah. But if you really look, who is scaling? That's the mass market brands, the simple brands. Like he said, Applebee's. I mean, and he described it. Yeah, he's right. It's like neighborhood comfort food, table service, liquor. And it's the backbone of this the
society
chain,
in a way,
and also of his chain, and not the next hipster thing where everybody runs there, and it's just a trend. So I think it's also a reminder, and I think it was very strong what he said, like pedestrian brands or whatever he called, like don't run after the shiny object. Brot und Butter, we would say
Wow, we hope you've enjoyed this episode as much as we did. But sharing is not just caring, it is also empowering. So recommend this podcast to fellow entrepreneurs who might need a dose of inspiration. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you'll never miss out on future episodes. Thank you for being part of the community from Doubt to Drive Entrepreneurs Only. Mario and Florian are already gearing up for the next episode. Until then, stay tuned, stay driven, and we'll be back next week.